Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Ted, the movie version, before I get to the miniseries, which I'll talk about in a sec, starring Mark Wahlberg, Mila Kunis, Seth MacFarlane, Joel McHale, and Giovanni Ribisi, directed by Seth MacFarlane. Speaking of him, I like the show Family Guy. I have maybe no matter what I think of this movie, his best effort on creating a show. I've seen a little bit of American Dad, but I'm not a big fan of that other movie he did called A Million Ways to Die in the West. Fuck that movie. It was terrible. So let's see how I feel about his Ted and Ted 2, as well as the mini series, which will be coming to Peacock on January. So if anybody that doesn't have Peacock, I don't know where else you could see it at. So sorry about that. I'll spoil it if you want me to get when I get there. But right now, let's get into the first movie. I remember going to theaters for this thing, feeling kind of pretty outraged by the humor, but it was a pot smoking teddy bear. So, and I'm gonna just narrate, and I'm just gonna say this a little early. I also have stories behind the second movie, which I'll talk about next time, as well as the movie itself. So let's get into this movie. We open in the year 1985 when a young John Bennett is an outcast by the neighborhood kids, as well as his kids from school, while being narrated by Patrick Stewart, as John asked for a friend for Christmas, and he gets a teddy bear named Teddy, or Ted for short. And on Christmas night, John wishes for Ted to be alive, and it shocks the hell out of his parents as well as John. And Ted is a big celebrity after fulfilling He Can Talk, as they do a lot of fun stuff together. For example, Ted pretending to be an animatronic creature at the pizza place, which after Five Nights at Freddy's and Chuck E. Cheese, I get the point now, to even seeing Star Wars The Phantom Menace on premiere night while Ted was disguised as Yoda, and John disguised himself as Darth Maul, and they're the best of friends to the year of 2012 while living in Boston, or should I say Baston, and Ted, voiced by Seth MacFarlane, who sounds a hell of a lot like Peter Griffin from Family Guy, because he also voices him, as well as Stewie and Brian, but let's move on, smokes a shit ton of pot, while John, played by Mark Wahlberg, as he gets to work, and the humor is making me laugh, but it's not as funny as Family Guy, in my opinion. John works at a rent-a-car company with a boss named Thomas Murphy, and John tells his coworkers Guy, played by Patrick Warburton, who's also in Family Guy, Alex, spelled with an I, and Tanya, who's played by Supergirl from Smallville herself, Laura Vandervoort, who I've also reviewed in Jigsaw before, but let's forget that movie. He's been dating his girlfriend Lori Collins, played by Mila Kunis, who was also in Family Guy, as they've been dating for 4 years, as it is their fourth anniversary. John wants to take her someplace nice for their fourth anniversary, and John and Ted watch Flash Gordon, which I have seen kind of recently because of a Star Wars movie. I forget which one it was. And it's not as great as they're led to believe, and they almost sleep together until, and by they, I'm talking about John and Lori, until a little thunder comes in and Ted runs into the room and sings the Thunder Buddy song, which will curse the thunder, which is amusing, while Lori is fed up with the fact John can't live without Ted, and the jokes go by very quick. And that's what I like about comedies in general. Not that, okay, I'm going to just preview this right now. I'm never doing The Hangover because that's a dead series to me. I like the first one to preview that, and then the sequels, garbage. But with an R-rated comedy like this, as I'm not a big fan of a lot of them, or should I say as of recently, because when you get an R-rated raunchy humor movie, it doesn't make me laugh anymore. But this movie came out before any of that ever happened, so let's just move on. It might need a little bit of an editing at an hour and 45 minutes, like maybe 10 minutes of it could have been cut out, but I'm not disliking the movie at this point, because it's amusing and it's making me laugh to this point, as I'm about 20 minutes into the movie. Lori goes to work for her dickhead boss, Rex, played by Joel McHale, who hits on Lori despite she has a boyfriend, And I'm not the kind of person who tries to steal other guys' girlfriends away or wives or something from them, which is exactly what Rex is trying to do here. And as a boss, he could be fired at this point. So, like, she should have filed sexual harassment for that reason alone. So that was problematic for work reasons. John and Lori have dinner at a fancy restaurant for their 4th anniversary, and they recap on how they met at by John's horrible dancing, as he remembers it differently, like they met Saturday Night Fever style, which is a dumb fantasy, sure. And she is not impressed with John's gift of the earrings from the mall, to the point while he doesn't have the money for a wedding ring, where she asks John to make Ted move out of their place, and he's not thrilled about it. And for a best friend like Ted, how could anybody do so, as is a fucking teddy bear who can live on his own, for Christ's sakes? And he crosses the line by inviting 4 strippers to the apartment, as one of them shits on the floor, and after they leave, they freak out and throw it away, which is a joke on Family Guy that gets old really fast, in my opinion. But I would prefer Family Guy without Vinny, or before Brian dies, and then they replace the dog with Vinny, although they kind of terminated that line after how much low ratings it's been getting. But it's fine in this film, but once again, it gets old really fast. John takes Ted to the aquarium and tells him to move out, and he takes it kind of well and promises he'll get Ted on his feet and they'll hang out all the time. And Ted gets a job at a grocery store as well as an apartment of his own, while in the interview he talks disrespectfully to his new boss, which is pretty damn unrealistic, but it's kind of funny. Not as funny, but it's still kind of funny. John and Ted hang out at the park and smoke some pot after Ted getting a job at the grocery store, and they get approached by Donnie, played by Giovanni Ribisi, and his son Robert, and tells them Robert wants Ted, and Donnie is sensitive for John to curse in front of Robert, or children in general, at this point, as Ted curses his ass off from the beginning of the movie. But it sort of makes it funny. While working at the grocery store, Ted meets a new cashier coworker named Tammy Lynn, played by Jessica Barth, and does some sexual innuendos while at work, until eventually he draws a line. And this scene is a funny way to introduce the love of Ted's life, who will get married in the next movie, while Ted makes John come to his apartment and gets Ted's lover till and guess Ted's lover's name till he gives up, which is a pretty pointless scene. And the sexual innuendos is pretty funny in my opinion. Ted has sexual intercourse with Tammy Lynn, and suddenly his boss promotes Ted to a higher position, which is a questionable decision in my opinion. While Donnie creeps up on Ted before he and Tammy Lynn double date with John and Lori, which turns out to be a disaster. While Lori gives Tammy Lynn a hard time and they walk out of the restaurant, all pissed off at Lori, while she brings up how he went to Ted's place in the middle of a workday, while making up some bullshit excuse about in order to go to Ted's place, while Lori, I swear to God, comes off like a bitch in this movie. And no wonder she's not in the next movie. Well, she'll be in the rest of Family Guy by then, but I don't blame Mila Kunis. I blame the character she's playing. And after that choice, throws her the fuck out. I mean, like, and after that choice, throw her the fuck out. I mean, oh my God. But don't get me wrong, I like Mila Kunis and I like these characters, but the only one I think I don't give a shit about at this point is Lori. She's very bitchy throughout the movie. John and Lori goes to Rex's place as Rex comes off like an asshole, until Ted calls John and tells him Sam Jones is at his apartment while he's having a fucking party, and tells him to get over there. And as John arrives to Ted's place, he meets Sam Jones with the Flash Gordon theme playing in the background. And in case if anybody doesn't know who Sam Jones is, he's the guy from Flash Gordon, and who will be well known for this movie. After that, I have his autograph, and I don't know where I put it though. As they become very good friends and getting high and drunk and getting fucked up, as they bring up how Ted sounds like Peter Griffin, which I knew was coming, as I swear to God, he does have that voice while Guy is there, Patrick Warburton, I mean, with Ryan Reynolds as a cameo, and Sam, John, and Ted have a fight with an Asian man and his duck named James Franco. And I thought, what the fuck is that all about? And Laurie comes in and sees John is at Ted's place, and she dumps him. And John tells Ted he can't see him anymore, and John alienates Ted, and this scene goes on a tad bit too long. John lives in a hotel for now while Laurie watches a Bridget Jones movie, I'll say, and she gets asked by Rex to see Nora Jones in concert while Ted goes to John's hotel room and has a fight with him until John's dick gets squished by the TV. And this scene again is taking a tad bit too long. They get to the Nora Jones concert along with Laurie and Rex, and as it turns out, Ted is friends with Nora Jones as they met in 2002. And John comes out and sings a song from the James Bond movie Octopussy rather horribly and gets booed off the stage and crawled off the stage from security, which is a painful scene to watch. As Laurie takes a cab home and away from Rex, which this scene falls apart as this movie starts to kind of fall apart by this point. Ted goes to Laurie's place to talk some sense into her and tells her to go to him. As she does, he's in a restaurant called Charlie's, which is the name of a restaurant. And John talks to Laurie, and she decides to forgive him afterhand and talks with him some more in her car as Ted gets kidnapped by Donnie and Robert, and they take him to their place. And Robert is kind of abusive towards Ted, like ripping his ear off, for example. Meanwhile, Donnie dances to a song which looks a little stupid on Giovanni Ribisi's part, as he felt kind of wasted by this movie, in my opinion. Although I haven't seen the guy act since the sequel. I'll talk about it next time. And John still has the address to Donnie's place, and Donnie and Robert take Ted to a faraway place, and John and Laurie go after them, and they get to a baseball field where they crash at, and Ted runs from Donnie and Robert as they follow behind, as well as John and Laurie, while Ted is being ripped in half, no thanks to Donnie, and Robert getting sucker punched in the face by John, which can be illegal, by the way, folks. I'm just going to throw that out there. And John and Laurie catch up to Ted, as he's ripped in half and turns into a regular teddy bear and briefly dies, while Donnie gets arrested until John and Laurie take him back to their apartment, and Laurie wishes for Ted to be alive again. And the next morning, he wakes up and they become a little family again, kind of, after John and Ted realizing Laurie wished for Ted to be alive again. And John marries Laurie with Sam Jones, the man marrying the newlyweds, and we get a recap by Patrick Stewart about everybody living their lives, like Sam Jones living with Brandon Routh from Superman Returns in L.A., as Patrick Stewart takes a shit on him for Superman Returns, I say. And Donnie was charged for kidnapping Ted, and the court dropped the charges as it completely sounded stupid. And Robert went on to become Taylor Lautner, which did make me laugh the hardest for this third act, I'll say, as that was hilarious. But the climax does unfortunately fall apart. And I did like the movie, but there are jokes on the second half that were falling apart, in my opinion. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 6.2 out of 10. It's a funny movie, but not as funny as Family Guy, which every episode was 20 minutes long, whereas this movie goes on a tad bit too long, as 10 minutes should have been cut out, as some of them do go on a bit too long, as the rule of comedy is make a joke one time, don't make it repeatedly, and don't take it too far, as this movie did by the second half, as this is a bit of a long movie. A little bit, not too much. Some lines are funnier than others, and I do like the characters, but Mila Kunis should probably get out of the franchise. And I'm glad by the next movie she gets written off so she can continue to be in Family Guy with Seth MacFarlane. But the jokes run out of gas for the last 45 minutes of it, but I like the jokes for the first hour of it. I did like the cameos from Sam Jones and Ryan Reynolds, but the jokes fell apart by the 1 hour mark, like I said. But don't get me wrong, I like the movie as it was humorous. It has its humorous moments as it kind of made me laugh. So I'm giving this movie a recommendation. Like, if you like Family Guy like I do, you'll like this movie, but at the same time, the jokes unfortunately get a little tired after a while, in my opinion. So we'll be back next time with Ted 2, and I'll talk more about my story with that film. And until then, I want everybody's heard about the bird, bird. The bird's a word.